Hi, Bill Doherty, co-founder of the Doherty Relationship Institute. And in this video, I want to talk about a very common presentation in therapy that I think gets therapists in trouble when we take it at face value. So here's it is. And I'm going to refer to it as, in the most common stereotypical, we have a heterosexual marriage, and the wife says, as part of her presentation, I carry the emotional weight in the relationship. I'm the one who brings up feelings, who gets into issues, who wants to talk about things, and my husband, he doesn't. He doesn't open up. He doesn't tell me what he feels. I don't feel emotionally connected to him. I have an emotionally unavailable mate. Okay, you've heard that term, emotionally unavailable. And it's really tempting for a therapist to take that at face value. And particularly when you're getting the guy going, I don't know what you're talking about, just trying to be happy in my marriage. And so this is, by the way, I just have to say parenthetically, this can be a particular trap for therapists because we do intimacy for a living, okay, emotional intelligence and all that. We can carry over to our own marriages the very problem I'm saying happens when people come into our offices, okay? So we're not immune to this. So the trap is to assume that the person, in this case the wife, who has the language of emotion, can give you 5 or 6 of them, you know, when you ask, and the other person doesn't have a lot of the language of emotion. To assume that you have a more advanced person, a more emotionally evolved person here, and you have a less evolved. And then if you're into a kind of a deficit approach, you can start to say, well, what's wrong with him that he can't even identify his feelings? So in the Doherty approach, this is one of the things that we talk about and have strategies to work with. I'll just give you some highlights here. Number 1, I assume, unless proven otherwise, that this guy has all of the emotions, has all of the depth, full human range that his wife does and that we all do. Knowing sometimes you have somebody who is drastically impaired, but that's not the most common approach here. And that this environment that has been created in the marriage is not one in which he's able or feels able to articulate those, where he's coming from. Number 1, so I don't assume deficits. Number 2, what I look for in the other spouse, in this case the wife, is often an inflated notion of how evolved she is, how much she understands herself, and particularly how much insight she has into the marital dynamic and into her husband's psychological dynamic. So what can happen, systemically, what can happen is if somebody is emphasizing their own analysis of themselves and of the marriage and the spouse, they get to be the expert on themselves, which they are, right? But on the marriage and on their spouse. So she'll give you her assessment of his issues. And what's the trap here is, of course, if she assesses her own with openness and vulnerability, then you think, well, she's just not blaming him. She'll speak for her family of origin issues and his family of origin issues. And the trap for therapists is to miss the fact that the boundaries are collapsing all over the place here. And that we are mostly, all of us, including us therapists, we are partly blind to what our relationship is like and have big blind spots about our spouse. And that's why we go to therapy, okay? Because we can't see things. So with what I'm expecting then with the expert spouse, the emotionally more evolved spouse, is I'm expecting them to get some aha revelations here about what's really going on with their partner. When I bring that out, like, oh, that's what's going on. I was wrong. And then also I'm expecting that person, in this case the wife, to see more about how she unintentionally negatively impacts him and shuts him down. Okay? And and then carries the burden. The burden. She is feeling burdened of carrying the emotional weight. Whew, it is a burden, and it's partly a self-imposed burden, and that's what I'm going to try to help her understand as well. So, in summary, what I'm saying is, this is a kind of dangerous presentation to a modern day couples therapist who's interested in emotional language, emotional availability, and intimacy. It's a risky presentation to buy into the notion that we have a drastic inequality here in emotional depth of these people, psychological depth, and then just walk right into that trap. And what I'm saying is, based on my experience, and we teach a lot about how to do this, you can bring both people along. They both can approach this with understanding, with humility, and they become more sensitive to each other.